Memories of Creature 88 by user RegalLegalEagle. Chapter 9. Cultural Exchange. No. There is simply no way that you're correct in this matter. The thought that there is an organization operating within this city that has access to the type of commandos you describe and is not part of hierarchy forces is entirely and categorically impossible. This had been going on for almost an hour now. The Yervish was about as worked up as Vincent had ever seen one. His makeup on that stone face was extremely elaborate and intricate, which Vincent was sure meant more to other Yervish than it did to him. All the Yervish in the room had similar such makeup on their faces. He hadn't seen so many high-ranking Yervish since his early days when they were trying to figure out what to do with him. Why would I lie to you? What possible reason could I have to lie? It's clear that you aren't lying. This came from a female Yervish to his left. It's simply that you must be mistaken. So then who shot at me? Whose knives did we collect? And the helmet shards, what about those? You've mentioned this building was well stocked for an attack, and the explosives they wanted to use to ambush our commandos speak of excellent funding. It's much more likely that the sale of the illicit drug known as black blood must be supporting their purchases of more expensive equipment. Common felons, just better gear, she continued. No, Vincent shook his head. Those were not common felons. They were very clearly motivated, driven, and trained. I've been on nearly constant patrol for a year. I have more recorded kills than any other detective in your history. I know the difference between common felons and highly trained operatives. Listen here, you miserable little shade, the first one in the center growled out, clearly taking this harder than the rest who looked concerned and dubious, but not outright furious like he was. He'd never seen a Yervish this agitated. What was behind it? Guilty conscience? What Supreme Council Chair Latero means to say, another male, this one to his right, quickly spoke up to head off whatever the head honcho was going to say, is that this might not be common felons, but they can't be Union trained. That's all. All Union commandos are Yervish, and these clearly weren't Yervish. What about the personal soldiers the dragons use? He asked. My counselor has guards of the same species. The various members glanced around at one another, seemingly a little surprised by that. Are you suggesting one of our society's best and brightest is behind criminal activity? This came from a female just to the right of Latero. That's simply not possible, Latero then growled. In the entire history of the Union, a dragon has never once instigated violence against patrol forces or worked actively against the security and well-being of the Union or hierarchy. The worst they can be accused of is involvement in that game they engage in where they vie for power against one another. But that has never spilled over into general fighting that concerns the general public, and as such is a private matter. And what about their gear? They had armor that was heavily resistant to the queer fire. That's something even your commandos don't have, but the dragon's soldiers do. Stop calling those weapons that, Latero barked. It's unprofessional. That's the fucking acronym. Quick Unloading Energy Repeater. Queer. I will not argue this with you. Stop using the term on your reports in the future. As for the armor, that's up for debate. We are not arguing over the quality of the gear. Yes, as you've pointed out, it's very high quality and similar to what the dragons supply their soldiers. That does not mean dragons are involved. The dragons still have commandos. Security forces, Latero hissed out. They have not been trained by us, and we are the only military forces within the Union, so only we are capable of training commandos. That was it. Pride. He wasn't pissed that Vincent had discovered some secret. He was insulted that he even whispered the idea that someone else had commandos beside the Yervish. It really seemed to get to him. Fine. Then they weren't commandos. They were a well-trained criminal hit team. Does that really change what we're talking about? Yes! Now that you've seen the light, you can change the official report! Letero growled out and pushed the papers across the table towards Vincent. He frowned for a moment. Why does that matter? I know that you're painfully ignorant of the workings of the hierarchy, Shade, but it makes a great deal of difference. So change the report, Shade. The Yervish stared straight at him while Vincent, for the first time in months, nearly squirmed under the spotlight. But he couldn't show anxiety or nerves to his own superiors any more than he could to the felons while he was on patrol. He walked forward then to the table, and the Yervish handed him a fancy pen, which he took and quickly flipped through the handwritten report, scratching out the times he described the hit team as commandos and replaced it with hit team. When he was done, on the final page he wrote "edited by the Shade" and signed it. Letero held up his hand, and Vincent gave him back the pen before Letero quickly flipped through the report. Once he was satisfied, he looked back up at Vincent before clasping his hands. You're dismissed. Vincent snorted and turned, walking out of the council room as he shook his head. For the most part, he'd stayed out of politics within patrol, and the Yervish command structure in general. He could never be anything more than a detective, so promotion wasn't a concern, and he didn't make friends. He hated this sort of thing. He could understand why people would play the game for their own gain, but when the fate of an entire city and millions or maybe billions of residents depended on their decisions, how could they justify it? Once he was outside, he saw Cavazor wearing his formal uniform and more makeup than was usual, which made Vincent frown. The Yervish perked up as he saw Vincent and approached. Did they ask for me? What? No. His handler looked crestfallen. No? Did you at least recommend me for a commendation? What? Vincent was confused. Wait, what do you think happened in there? They didn't call you here for a medal and reward for the good job done raiding that black blood manufactory? I don't even know how much of the supply we just stopped, but it must be a huge percentage. Vincent slowly shook his head. No, they called me here to chew me out for calling that enemy commando team a commando team. I just spent the last hour getting yelled at. Well, you guys don't yell much. I got very sternly spoken to. Cavazor blinked, looking confused. What? No commendation? Not even one word about a good job? No. The Yervish stood there, obviously surprised if not shocked at the news. But that was the largest drug bust in our history. You saved the lives of all of those commandos by not letting them land. He looked a little lost as he said that, and it was the first time Vincent could ever remember the Yervish really standing up for the good job Vincent had done. I'm just a shade, Cavazor. Shades don't get medals. He was about to go on when the door behind him opened, and one of the council members leaned out. Since you're here, we'd like to speak to you. He pointed at Cavazor, who glanced at Vincent, gulped, and then nodded as he followed the counselor into the chamber. Vincent certainly hoped they'd give his handler a commendation or a promotion or something. Cavazor was a good man. Yervish. Whatever. He deserved a post he'd enjoy and not have his career thrown away by Vincent. Vincent was then alone on the top floor of the patrol HQ. It wasn't a place he'd been very often for rather obvious reasons. He had expected lavish displays of wealth and power, but to be honest, the only luxury the Yervish who worked on this floor seemed to enjoy was more space. Other than that, the construction all seemed to be that similar Spartan and efficient style he expected from them. He wondered if Yervish homes were like this as well, or if it was simply because this was a public building. Stepping into the lift, he took it down to the ground floor, trying to decide what to do with his time. Fuck. What time was it even? He usually didn't care, but suddenly he didn't have something pressing to do. Normally when that happened, it was at the end of a week of solid patrols and with some time to plan out his day, and generally get ready for just taking some synth and doing as little as possible. He wasn't really prepared for sudden free time. He walked out of the lift, heading through the ground floor of the HQ, ignoring the various patrols bringing in new suspects and felons. When he reached the lobby, however, the female Yervish who'd spoken to him before nodded out to his side. "You've got some friends waiting for you." Vincent looked over and saw 3 very out-of-place satyrs in silver armor sitting in the waiting area. He first went for his magnum before he realized they were calmly staring at him, weapons slung over their shoulders. These had to be some of his counselor's troops. "You didn't take their weapons away?" he asked the receptionist. She frowned at that. "No, why?" He shook his head and walked towards them, stopping once they stood up. "Our employer says it's time for another meeting." Vincent noted the odd emphasis on employer. "I thought there was supposed to be a few days in between appointments." "It has been 2 days." Vincent blinked at the information and tried to figure out if he was being lied to. He'd gotten high, gone on patrol, died, gotten his gun back, and assaulted the drug lab before being debriefed and chewed out. How could that possibly be 2 days? Shit, with all the travel time and death, he realized he had no idea how much time had really passed. His sense of time was entirely fucked up, especially since he almost never saw the sun. When had he last eaten? Well, shit, now he was hungry. "I have to sync up my memories first." "Our employer figured that this is actually perfect timing since the council likely won't want your meeting to be on record, and you synced after returning from your mission." Vincent thought it over for a moment and realized they were probably right. Some people might have wondered how the dragon had known all that, but since his counselor admitted to collecting intelligence and spying, Vincent thought nothing of it. Looking between the 3 silver-faced figures, he shrugged. "All right, lead the way." He followed them out of the HQ and through the large square towards the lifts that led up to Sector 1. Unlike before, they didn't even bother stopping him this time. But he did notice the Yervish guards watched Vincent and his escorts walk through the security checkpoint into the fancy lift he'd taken before. They were soon heading up into the clouds and then above them like he had before. When they broke into the sun, he groaned and covered his eyes, thinking about pulling his mask on just so he didn't have to deal with the damn sunlight. Sector 1 was as gorgeous and luxurious as he remembered it. He frowned as he watched some sort of procession or parade going on in the main square the lift was now slipping past. Some sort of celebration? "Parades through the business district are common. It helps remind them how much they have to gain if they work hard enough to get residence in Sector 1, spoke the satyr closest to him. "How many applicants are allowed in each year?" "Of applicants who have a more reasonable chance, you mean? Or of all the people who don't understand how it works?" "Just the people who actually have a decent chance at making it." "Less than 1%. I don't have the exact numbers, but it is more than you'd think, and less than they wish, of course. There are hundreds of billions of citizens in the Union. They all want to live in Sector 1. Those who work hard can get jobs here, or a temporary vacation visa. But only the truly great are worthy of living here. Then there are us." Vincent glanced at his reflection in the silver mask of the satyr. "And what's special about you guys?" "We are chosen, hand-picked by the glorious dragons for service. On our home world we live in primitive tribes that war and fight over dirt. But when a young dragon arrives, we compete for the right of ascension, to serve them for life in our new home." "Why doesn't the Union just uplift your planet or whatever, let you all live better?" "This was what we chose for ourselves centuries ago." "What about kids?" "Dragons outlive all species by generations. We are descended from the originals he chose. We serve until the death of our employer. Then we follow their wishes, whatever those may be." "Doesn't sound like an employer. Sounds more like a master or god or something." "Each chooses their term. Our employer pays us despite our willingness to serve for free. We have contracts and are allowed to find new employment or retire. Somehow, I don't think any of you have ever done that. The first few who reached retirement age committed suicide the day before retirement. This greatly distressed our employer. Now our old will actually retire, but to us this simply means giving up active duty for light chores and teaching the next generation. Why? They guide the Union. They can see the paths that our great nation must take, while the teeming masses cannot. It is our honor to serve them, and better serve the billions of other citizens in the Union. Would you attack other dragons if your employer asked? Without question. Are you employed by anyone but dragons? The satyr was quiet for several seconds then, and Vincent wondered if he'd asked the wrong thing for a moment. There are stories, rumors of a cult. Some say they remain from before the first ascension. I don't know for certain, but it's possible. So, why are you telling me this? He paused for a moment and then nodded as it hit him. Because your employer already knows about the commandos. He didn't call like he could have so that we could come together and give you a chance to fill me in, help settle my nerves about your loyalty. We are utterly loyal to him. If he wished your death, it would have occurred when you first came to the estate. Whatever is going on, he is not behind it. I already know that. Their armor stopped energy bolts, but not 44 Magnum rounds. Why would he give me a gun he couldn't counter? Unless, of course, he wanted me to think that. But even if that were the case, he'd warn them. Or perhaps sabotage me some other way. I might not have a great reason to trust him, but I have less of a reason to distrust him. Things were quiet as the lift moved along, and then Vincent looked around the compartment. The lift is bugged, isn't it? Yes, it is. See, you guys don't bother lying about shit like that. He has spies on everyone, I get it, and he knows I get it, so he's upfront about it. Vincent shrugged. In a city where so often everyone was trying to pretend to be something they weren't, the dragon seemed to be entirely honest about it. Soon the lift was coming down before the gate to the lavish estate, and they stepped out. Once they passed through the fortified gatehouse, however, the guards dropped away, and he was left alone to walk through the garden. He found the same alcove from before where his counselor was waiting. This time he was sitting at the head of a table that was covered in food. Unlike the pastries and desserts from before, this was a feast. Meats, breads, cheeses, all manner of foods that Vincent didn't recognize and very few that he did. He'd long since lost his sense of what ethnic food was or wasn't, since the city was filled with Xenos. The dragon lifted a massive glass of what looked like wine and waved Vincent to the chair at the far end of the table. Instead, Vincent grabbed the back of the chair, dragging it along the table and then setting it up next to the dragon. Didn't like the seating arrangements. Not really. So then, counselor. Mock, please, Vincent, we're on a first-name basis, aren't we? He asked, and took a sip of his wine. Mock. Hearing his name being said it felt good. He had to sit there for a moment as he tried to get over the fact that simply having someone treat him like a normal person felt much better than it should. Mock. He started again. What the fuck is going on? The dragon arched a brow and swirled his wine. We're having lunch. You mentioned you were hungry to your escort, so I figured I'd help you out. He waved a massive hand at the spread before him. No, Vincent waved his hand. Not the food, I get that. I mean the satyr commandos. Black blood is being made from the husks of other... He caught himself at the last moment and managed to keep from triggering the effect, while Mock stared at him with concern. I'm okay. Almost did something stupid. Right. It's being made from the husks of others of my species. I read the report. Yeah, well, you're acting kind of calm while I feel like freaking out, so it's just a tad distressing.
Getting stressed out helps no one but your opponent. The best way to start working towards a solution is to let calm prevail.
Yeah, that might be great for speeches and parties and politics, but I'm a detective. There are times when I need to be as not calm as possible. The dragon nodded.
I'll concede we're products of different jobs.
Yeah, just a little. Vincent looked at the food in front of him and then grabbed a plate, picking up various things and setting them down as he started to eat. Often he stuck to breads and meats since some of the other Xeno foods made him a little uneasy, but something about the dragon made him pick all kinds of different blobs and slimes and the like. He started to drag some bread through blue guacamole, which actually tasted more like spinach and artichoke spread.
I studied your various food choices where I could determine what you might like, and then had my chefs make sure it all worked for your physiology. It's actually rather interesting. Everything I can eat, you can eat, and the other way around. I can't remember hearing about two species being perfectly compatible before in terms of food.
Vincent frowned as he broke off some sort of claw and dipped it in a sauce he hoped was butter. None?
Not perfectly. Many are close, but there are things that must be avoided. Even my guards can't eat everything I can eat. They react poorly to chocolate and some citrus.
Vincent arched a brow and crunched down on the claw before nodding and biting into it once more. They did sound more like dogs than goats, but their bodies and the horns still fit satyrs more. Vincent meant to speak more, but once he started to eat, he realized how hungry he really was, and he began to dig into the feast with more zeal than he'd first expected. Mock seemed to notice this.
Have you not eaten?
Vincent shook his head.
Why not?
Vincent shrugged and swallowed a chunk of meat and cheese. I don't know. I think not having a real cycle sort of fucks me up. That and I keep dying, so when I'm revived it takes time before my body seems to realize it needs to start doing things.
How do they clone your stomach?
Vincent frowned at that and looked down for a moment. What?
Sorry.
The dragon shook his head for a moment.
I mean the organisms within it. That's how you work, isn't it? A few million or billion or trillion little things in your intestine that help break everything down. That's how many species work, mine included.
Vincent shrugged. I don't know. I never thought about it before. Maybe they don't clone them. Maybe they just make them and inject them into my body. You're really asking the wrong person here. I'm just the test animal, remember? I'm not the scientist. He looked around the table for a moment. What choices are there for drinks?
Did you want alcohol?
No.
That purple one is juice, that grayish one is milk, and that clear one is simply water.
Vincent grabbed the purple pitcher Mock had pointed out, pouring some into a cup and giving it a little sip before nodding and pouring more. You know, this is really going to spoil me. I'm used to eating at shitty diners and having greasy blobs of mystery meat. If I can get treatment like this all the time, I might want to give up on wandering the slums below Sector 30. Mock snorted and sipped his wine once more.
I'm very confident you'd get tired of this life very quickly, unless you're instead asking me to invite you to my next gala, or perhaps a ball.
Jesus Christ, no thank you.
Who is that? You reference that person now and then.
Oh, religious figure. Cultural expression of surprise or emphasis, I guess.
So, you are religious?
No, I'm very not religious.
Then...
It's just a cultural thing, like I said. It's hard to explain. I mean, I use fuck a lot as a bad thing, but in a sense it just means to have sex.
I'm familiar with the word fuck.
Vincent stared at the dragon then.
What?
Mock asked. I've never heard anyone but felons and myself swear.
Just because we choose to use other words to better express ourselves doesn't mean that swear words are foreign to us.
Vincent shrugged. So do you have any idea who the commandos are?
I do not. Their appearance at the drug lab is most serious.
Could it be another dragon?
I heard your conversation with the council. That's why I sent my satyrs.
Fuck, you've even got the council chamber rigged? How the hell do they not check for that sort of thing?
They don't expect anyone to spy on them. Why should they? The real trick is making sure none of my competitors are also bugging them. That's much more difficult.
Yeah, speaking of, I can't believe you tried to bug my apartment. Vincent shook his head as he thought about the bugs he'd found before he'd looked in on the hidden black box. He was grabbing some more food when he noticed the way Mock was staring at him. What?
What bugs?
That wasn't you?
Most certainly not. Why would I try to gain your trust and then turn around and start spying on your place of living?
Vincent sat there, realizing it didn't make any sense, but he'd been in too much of a hurry to follow up on it. Well, someone else knows where I live.
How did they get in?
It was when someone dropped off my magnum. Vincent watched the dragon peer off at nothing as he clearly thought over the situation.
Well, it wasn't me, I assure you.
I guess that makes sense, but who was it? Mock was quiet as he sipped at his wine again, and kept looking off at nothing before he finally responded.
I don't know.
They ate in quiet for a little after that before Vincent had time to think over what he wanted to say. Why does the term commandos matter so much to my superiors?
It would indicate to the AI a hostile foreign presence instead of an internal one.
So?
So that would mean the Yurvish have been utterly negligent in their function to let an unknown hostile nation get commandos into our capital.
Ah. This would impact their station in the hierarchy.
Correct.
I still don't think they're taking this threat as seriously as they need to.
Trust me, Vincent, they're stepping up to the challenge. They aren't taking the path I would, and likely not the one you'd advise, but they're bringing in more military to start helping the beleaguered patrol here in the city.
I don't think that's a good choice either. The military is full of killers. They're trained to kill.
So are patrol.
Yeah, but they're also trained to de-escalate. Mock laughed as Vincent frowned. What?
I'm not sure that I'd describe your usual tactics as de-escalation.
I kill less people than I could, you know. But point taken.
De-escalation is for crimes of passion. The felons, those who are starting to seek to kill, patrol for the bounty, do you think they can be de-escalated?
No, but I think they can be made to fear retribution more than they desire credits. Mock smiled and nodded as Vincent mulled it over and continued. Which is why the military is being brought in. That's not standard Yurvish thinking at all.
It isn't. They've been analyzing your patrols. They're far heavier-handed, but you've set the tone.
I've inspired the police force in the city to try and drive fear into the hearts of the citizens?
Just the felons. But their tactics will likely do what you yourself fear. You give people some small comfort in that you're selective. If the military starts leveling habs to kill felons and innocents get caught in the crossfire, how long before citizens become felons?
Vincent slowly shook his head. Well, we need to get to the bottom of this.
I agree, but enjoy lunch. It will be some time before some of my other guests arrive.
Ah. Gotta get me out of here by then.
No, the opposite. You have to meet them before they leave. I'm bringing them here for your sake. I've found a few experts who might shed some light on your black boxes, and perhaps even the black blood now that you've given me more to work with.
Experts?
Indeed, and a few long shots who I invited because keeping a diverse crowd of academics means seeing each problem from as many sides as possible.
Vincent thought that over for a moment as he mulled the conversation around in his head. You said you're familiar with the word fuck. He finally spoke up as Mock looked over and arched a brow.
I am.
What's it mean?
Like you said, it's technically to have sex, but it's used far more commonly as an expletive. It's an all-purpose word that means a great deal of things based on context.
What language are we speaking right now? Vincent noticed the dragon frown with confusion before Vincent waved at the space between them. This whole time we've been talking, I hear it in a language that I understand. It's from my home planet, which is who knows how far from here. We clearly aren't the same species. Everything about my kin is a mystery to the scientists here. So how are we communicating?
I assume you can't name the language you're using?
No, I'd throw up my lunch and bleed all over the place. The dragon shrugged his massive shoulders and wings.
It's just the language. There's only one.
Vincent frowned. What do you mean there's only one?
Well, supposedly the worms have a secret one at times, but I know for a fact that they can use this one.
That didn't answer my question. When the Union finds new species, what language do they speak?
It's always the same.
Vincent blinked and then arranged the food on his plate. What letter is this?
M.
Vincent shifted the various things once more.
A.
Does the letter O look like a circle?
Yes.
Vincent stared at the dragon then. It's not possible that we're using the language from my home planet.
Why not? We all use the same one.
But on my home, it isn't the only language. There are like 100 or something, certainly more than 50. The dragon was confused.
That can't be right. All our histories show a direct path in language towards the same one we're using now. It's just called common to us for that reason.
I don't know. I guess the worms really fucked up my head. Vincent shrugged and leaned back, picking at more of the food as he tried to process everything going on. It was like everyone spoke English, but that didn't make sense.
You know, it's curious,
Mock said, as he looked at Vincent's wrist, and Vincent laid it out flat to look at his tattoo. 88.
You're called Creature 88 because of the tattoo. But it's only an 88 if you view it from the side.
Vincent extended his hand on the table a bit, then to look at it. What do you mean?
I mean, from your perspective, the 88 is sideways. To you, it would look like two infinity symbols, one on top of the other, right? A sideways 8 means infinite to us. Is it the same to you? My species has a legend of a snake that eats its own tail. Ouroboros. We use that symbol.
Vincent's sense suddenly seemed to draw back, as if everything was far off in the distance as he looked to Mock. What did you say?
Double infinite. Ouroboros.
The words echoed through his head then, and while the dragon kept speaking, he couldn't make any sense out of it. Instead, he clutched his chest as his breathing became labored and difficult. His entire body seemed to seize up as he fell out of his chair to the ground. He could see Mock standing to come to his aid, but his eyes rolled up into his head. And suddenly, the memories began to flood back to him. Oh boy, this part's really good. I forgot about this. You start to learn about Vincent. It's really good. Oh man. Oh, this part's really good. Also, you kind of find out that Vincent is, I mean, we already know he's not exactly a great guy, but well, you'll see. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me, paper or plastic? I mean, I know the answer should be obvious. We really need to stop it with the single-use plastic because we're dying and we're choking our oceans. But paper or plastic? Welcome to Costco. I love you. All right, guys. I'll see you later. Be good. Don't drink and drive. Try to stay indoors just a little bit longer. People, if you are in a place that is locking down, I am so sorry. Enjoy one of my videos. Enjoy a whole playlist. Hey, you know what? There's Creature 88. There's a few more series now. It could be a great day. Just go through all 150 or 60 of my videos. Have fun, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Patreon over there in the side thing there. And have a great one, guys. I love you. Bye, y'all.